40 years, and today I have my special guest. She's award-winning children's book, no other than Miss Violet LeMay. Welcome to Book 101, Miss Violet, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Daniel. Yes, I am an author and an illustrator, and I've written 8 books and have illustrated all of those, and I've illustrated about 40 books for other people also. So I have been doing this for quite a while, have a lot of books. Yeah, I've been very blessed in my career.
Congratulations for being award-winning author, Miss Violet. Thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. So let's talk about how to create an award-winning piece for
Mm.
children's book. What are the key elements to make children's book engaging for young readers?
Well, there are of course different kinds of books, and with a typical storybook, the thing to do to win an award is to have a really great story with a beginning, a middle, and an end that takes interesting twists and is hopefully funny and meaningful and all of that. And then for readers of all ages, but in my experience, for young readers, you also have just books, um, more concept books about color or about emotions, that type of thing. I've won awards for those kinds of books. But my most recent book, this one here, Alithia
Yes.
Ramirez was an artist. This book I wrote in response to the horrible school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, in the United States. And it's about a real little girl, Alithia Ramirez. And I think I think I think I'm biased. I think it's a beautiful book anyway. And it's a lovely story about a little girl who's an artist
Yes.
that has, the typical story elements. But I think the reason it got so much attention is because it's an unusual book that was about this terrible event and it approaches the topic in a unique way. It's an unusual topic for a picture book. You might not think you want to sit down and read a picture book to you're in a cozy bedtime room with your lovely little person and you're about to read a picture book. You might not want to read such a sad story. But this book, Alethea Ramirez was an artist, isn't sad at all. It doesn't mention anything about the shooting, except it explains who Alethea was on the very last page. Looks like this. So, and it's in a different font and all of that, so that when the parent or caregiver is reading the book to their child, when they get to the end, they can quietly read to themselves what happened to Alethea and then decide how or if at all to even share that information, because you certainly don't have to when you read the book.
So, Miss Violet, do you think in the future you want to expound this to a memoir?
Write a memoir about myself?
Yes, together
Well,
with writing children's award-winning piece.
oh, thank you so much. I have looked into writing a memoir and I've got some ideas about doing something like that, but I'm not sure if that's in my future. That requires a lot of courage, I think, because you have to, share so much about your life and the people in your life with the world. And is that something that you're interested in, Daniel, is memoir writing?
Oh yes,
Mm,
definitely.
mhm.
So, how did you decide on the age group of your book?
Well, yes. So age groups are very fussy, in particular in children's books, And the publisher worked with me to select the age range, which for this book, I'm not sure if I remember, but I think it's ages 4 to 8 or something like that. I think they made it a little bit older than I would have thought because of probably the subject matter. Um, but if you just, you probably know this, any author can just Google it. There are suggested age ranges for different types of books, for board books, picture books, and then chapter books and on up like that. And within picture books, there you can select a little chunk of 3 or 4 years to make it for younger readers or older readers. And this one I'm pretty sure it was because of the subject matter that the publisher decided to position it in the older range for children's picture books.
So, Miss Violet, what role does language play in writing a children's book?
Oh, the language. Well,
Yes.
so important in any book, obviously, as books are books are the art of words. So language is so important. Of course, with children's books, if you're writing for books for children to read them, you have to pay attention to the lexile categories and age ranges and what words they're learning to read and all of that. When you're writing a picture book, as I did, you have the luxury of knowing that an adult is probably going to be reading the book out loud to the child. So you can play a little bit more with language and, with use larger words with more syllables and all of that. But I I enjoy language. I love reading a well-written book. I love to read poetry. I can't write it, but I have an appreciation for language, and I try also to, because I'm an illustrator, to be very spare with my language and let the art do some of the talking. Because my favorite picture books are a very like clever blend of image and word. So as much as I can, I try to let the picture speak for itself, and then I try to include little visual jokes almost, so that the words might say one thing and the picture might contradict it, or the words might taper off or pose a question and then that is answered in the picture, something like that. I try to have the text and the words work very well together.
So, Miss Violet, can you distinguish to us what is a picture book and the ordinary children's book?
Between a picture book and, I'm sorry, what was that, Daniel?
Another children's book. What's
A
the
children's
difference?
Well, for example, let me see if I have one here. You have to forgive me. We just moved into our house and I have not unpacked everything. Oh, here I have one.
No worries.
I have oh, I have an example of a board book. So this is a board book for little babies actually. You can see
Yes.
it's printed on stiff board and there are very, very few words. This is actually a book for infants, so you don't get much younger than this. I mean, I have illustrated books before that are for teensy weensy infants that have no words at all, that are just high contrast books meant to help an infant's eyes develop, which is what this book is designed to do. This one's called Hello Ocean Friends. And it simply says hello to the baby in different languages every time you turn the page, which is a really cute idea. It's a great concept. This publisher, Duopress, um, thought up the concept and just hired me to illustrate the book. But so that this is for little tiny readers, and I've illustrated a whole and written also too a whole bunch of books that are board books for younger kids, and then picture books, which are for slightly older kids, have a hard cover typically, although they can also have a paper cover, but then just paper pages, paper on the inside. So that's the difference. And I don't have any examples of chapter books here. Um, which are, for early readers, little kids who are in school just learning to read. But those are typically like 4 by 6 inches, maybe a little bit bigger, printed on kind of pulpy paper, short chapters, small words, because the kids are learning to build their vocabulary. And then it just goes up from there.
So, what strategies did you use to create a relatable and memorable characters for children?
Well, I mean, I think all of us as writers have to be keen observers of everyone around us, and we can't help but put the people in our lives into the characters that we create. And of course, ourselves too. I feel like there's a little piece of me in every character I write about. And as a matter of fact, that's what drew me to Alethea and her story, because I'm an artist. I've always been an artist my whole life. And my son, who's grown now, was always an artist, always, always, always drawing. And when I read that Alethea Ramirez had been an artist, I felt like I knew her, and I chatted with her parents, and they told me all about her, and I just felt such a strong connection to her because I could completely understand her worldview and where she was coming from. And so for me, it was very easy to write a book about an artist because it was me. Alethea is Alethea, and I tried to include as much real information from her parents as I could in that book, but I also had, myself in mind and my son in mind. And I also used to be an art teacher at the Savannah College of Art and Design. So I've had so many art students. So just all of us collectively, I just put all of us sort of into that character. Um, but I think it's true no matter what kind of character you're writing about. You go through your day and you bump into people and quirky people. Like, for example, we just moved into this house, and all day today, our neighbor has been on her deck singing, and she can't hear me. I know she probably has earbuds in, and she's just singing along to the radio. But I thought, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I have to put that in the book someday because that's just such a relatable thing for a person to do. But I never would have thought of it if she hadn't, if that hadn't actually happened. So, yeah.
Yes. So, how do you balance creativity and simplicity in a story for young readers?
Mm. Well, it's easier for me now because I've done so many books. I have a lot of experience. And the more experience you get, the more sort of editing you can do in your head, you know?
Yes.
Um, but I think the thing to do is you write your draft, you write it just as fast as you can, and then you go through and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And every time you're rewriting, at least in my experience, I'm trying to pare down, just strip away any text that's unnecessary, any word that's unnecessary, whatever I don't absolutely need to tell the story. I try to just get rid of it. And part of the challenge with writing children's books that I think authors of books for adults can't grasp because they've never had the challenge of doing it is as you're editing that book, there's so little content because there's only 32 pages in a children's picture book, and the current trends are for very low word counts, like maybe let's say 500 words in a children's picture book. The ones that are uh, about actual people and science nonfiction ones have more words, but the fiction books have fewer words. So when you're first writing it and just paring it down, the book can go so many different directions, because if I just take out this one sentence, then it changes this whole chunk, and then it's going to make the book go this way. If I take out this other sentence, it's going to go that way. Um, so yeah, it's a challenging genre, age group to write, and I have a lot of respect for picture book authors who are very clever and write excellent books. It's not an easy task.
Very well said. Miss Violet, very well said. And how can humor be used effectively in a children's book?
Oh, I'm sorry, Daniel. I couldn't hear you over that thunderous applause. What was the first part?
How can humor be used effectively in a children's book?
Well, humor is so important, I think, in
Yes.
life, um, and in every book. Um, Children's books especially, because kids are silly. I think it's important to interject humor whenever you can. These days, the world can be so bleak. Sometimes I think maybe the most important function of a children's book is just to be silly. So all
Yes.
that it is funny. And I have to tell you, I'm not the funniest person. I married a very funny guy. He's super funny. And I can tell just from all my years of living with him that it comes very naturally to him. And for me, it's more of a struggle. I'm just not the funniest person. And my humor is very dry and tends to be a little bit more, I don't know, urbane or something. Not maybe at the level of a kid's book. One children's book that has always been very meaningful to me and a guide for me is the Olivia series, the little Olivia pig. Ian Falconer wrote and illustrated the original Olivia book, and he's a lifelong, I guess, New Yorker. I don't know. I shouldn't speak about his history. I don't really know, but he was a New Yorker, and his turn of phrase, the whole way he structured that book, his verb tense, everything about that book and the language of it, I just love. And I love his humor in that book. And actually, I sort of used it as a guidepost when I wrote Alethea Ramirez Was an Artist. And one way you can do that in a picture book is when you kind of set up the joke with your words and then the picture delivers the punchline. And you can do that by where you place the art on the pages. So you can start a joke on one page and then kind of leave the reader hanging and you turn the page and then there's the answer. And that's very funny. So
That's it.
yeah,
Yes.
that's one technique.
So Miss Violet, what are common mistakes to avoid when writing for children?
Oh, well, for new authors, I think there's just this human urge to feel
Yes.
the need to write in verse, to write a rhyming book. And I have to tell you, that is a gigantic mistake because publishers, if you look at publishers' websites, they will say specifically on there, don't write in verse. We don't want books in verse unless they're just like flawless and not forced. And there are poets who can do it and they do it well, but I think most people do it because they just feel like that's what they're supposed to do when you get started out. So I think that's one mistake people make for sure. Another mistake I think authors might make who aren't necessarily author illustrators is they might use a lot of descriptive text, to describe a setting or to describe a character. And since it's a picture book, that's just redundant, because the illustrator will portray the character a certain way, portray the environment a certain way, and you see it, so you don't need to say it. And especially with the trend in low word counts for picture books, that's a really good one to keep in mind. I also think the rhythm of a picture book is very important, and people who write but don't necessarily illustrate might not have as good of a grasp of that because illustrators are typically given the assignment, and by the time we get it, it's already been like laid out by a designer, probably with a little bit of text on every page and some art direction, so the flow is kind of already there. But I think it would be helpful for authors to understand how many pages are in a typical picture book, and when you're writing your manuscript, actually note what page you're on so you can get an idea of how many words per page, how you want the rhythm to build. Maybe you've got, just to spice it up a little bit, you've got a whole bunch of text on one page and then you flip and there's very little text on the next page, something like that. But that's another common mistake.
So, how do you incorporate diversity to inclusivity into children's stories?
Oh, that's extremely important to me for sure. Um, Yes. In fact, one of the other books that I wrote that won an award or two is called Let's Be Friends, and it's about this very thing. But I think this one, if you're a writer or an illustrator, if you're working on a more general book where you can just show anybody, then it's obviously easy because, like for example, that book, Let's Be Friends, didn't have one character through the whole book. Every time you turn the page, you're seeing different people. So it was very easy just to mix it up. And I made sure I kept a list actually, to tell myself, okay, these are the ethnic groups I'm representing on this page and on this page, just to make sure they're peppered through evenly and nobody was repeating and all of that. But when you're an author writing a book about a character, that's trickier, because you have one specific human here. And so, I mean, I think the easiest thing to do is to include friends when possible, and when you have a friend group, you mix it up like that. Um, in picture books, in most cases, you probably don't, as the author, even need to specify um, the race or ethnicity of your character, and you can leave it up to the publisher and the illustrator to sort out what that's going to be, unless it's relevant to the story. If it's unless it's a story about a real person or it's about those types of things. Um, but yeah, I think just being conscious of it, that's the main thing. Just be conscious of it and always trying to show as many people as you can, because every kid wants to see himself or herself in the books they're reading. I illustrated a book. This was an educational product a few years ago. And I inherited the character. Someone else had already drawn this little character first. So I drew him for the second or third time. I forget his name. I think it was Max, this little Asian boy in the book. And when I was promoting it, when the book came out, this mom sent me a direct message privately and asked how she could find the book because she couldn't find any books for her Asian son. And oh gosh, I was so touched by that. And I sent her copies of the book. But I mean, I even at that point, I was already trying to be as inclusive as I could in all of my projects. But that's just always in the back of my head, that every little child wants to see himself or herself in the book, and so I try to show everybody.
Definitely. So, Miss Violet, what is your advice for those aspiring writers out there want to do children's book?
Well, my first piece of advice is to read as many of those books as possible, and make sure that the books that you're reading are as current as possible, because there are big trends. I'm not talking about trying to be trendy in your writing, but the book that was your favorite book when you were a child probably is seriously outdated by now in terms of what publishers are looking for. So I would just read a real lot. It's much easier to write a children's book if you've just, spent the last 2 or 3 weeks reading them, and you've now read 100 children's books. It's kind of, it like puts you in the mindset and becomes much easier. And so whatever the age range is that you wish to write, my main advice would be to just become an avid reader of that age group and really get to know how publishers are handling books for that age group right now. And then the second thing is to just write as much as possible. I think a lot of people think about writing and talk about writing way more than they actually write. And I think it's so important to actually be writing. And once you have written the book, that means that's the draft that's just for you. And it is like the raw clay, like you have just created the clay. And now you have to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And as you're rewriting it, then you're sculpting the clay into something beautiful. But I think a lot of writers are under the misconception that that first draft is the final project. And I mean, it's a seriously competitive business, and nothing could be farther from the truth. So I think reading and practice writing, those are my two main pieces of advice.
Excellent advice, Miss Violet. Excellent advice. So, what is your short-term and long-term goals in writing children's book?
Mm, okay. My short term and long term goals are kind of similar to each other. I would like to be able to write books for older children because I really love reading very good middle grade and young adult books. And I've already written a few and just trying to find a literary agent for that age group and publishers for that age group. So, yeah, I'm working on that every day. Every time I have free time, like when I'm between projects, for example, I might have 2 months off. I don't take that time off. I'm glued to my chair and I write all day, every day. Um, I'm working. I'm starting on my third novel right now, and anyway, just practice, 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 and trying to get a book published because I think with books for older children, the potential to be invited to schools and do those kinds of events, is there a little bit more in a way that is not that the other isn't meaningful to me, because it is. I love all kids of all ages. I love babies. I love toddlers and all of that. But I really like being in a classroom situation with older kids, especially kids who might be interested in writing, or who are just needing some encouragement in their art or just in their life in any way. I would appreciate, I guess you'd call it a platform, having a platform like that, or just having that built into my work life a little bit. So that's both my short term and my long term goal, really.
Miss Violet, good luck for your goals and looking forward for more award-winning piece like this. So to sum up our discussion, how can you build an emotional connection between the reader and the story?
Emotional connection. Well, it helps to write about emotional things, doesn't it? I
Yes.
think for me, when I am reading as a reader, I know I feel very emotional when I get attached to the character and they're going through something. So I think the trick is to write relatable characters, and then they have to face challenges. I mean, that's what a story is, right? You've got your character has a goal and something's in the way. And so I think that's the key, is to draw your reader in by showing the good and the bad of your characters, and then bringing your reader along for the ride as your character goes through whatever this tumult is to get to their goal at the end.
Yes, definitely. Miss Violet Lemay, again, thank you so much for giving us your award-winning piece. And as I said, we are looking forward for more empowering books to come because our children is our future generations to generation. Let's empower them. So, Miss Violet, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, you can see all my books at my violetlemay.com. And if you guys would follow me on social media, That would help me. I'm always at Violet LeMay. So find me there and I'll follow you back. And I really appreciate your support.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Violet LeMay because, as I said, if you support her, well, 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 more empowering books to come. So, Miss Violet, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. Bye.
More to come, people. See you soon. So, how's the weather in New Zealand, Miss Violet? Is it
Um,